second generation star, of course, Stan the Man Stasiak. And were you? I'm going to further on draw parallels with The Rock as well, because you're second. He's obviously third generation, but Dad's a wrestler. Were you sort of an army brat style? Moving from territory to territory with your father, or were you in one fixed location while he went and plied his trade?
Oh no. I was yanked in and out of school districts my whole life. I was always an outsider. Always. In fact, I was a victim of bullying, and because, of course, back in those days, in the '70s and early '80s, the cat wasn't out of the bag quite yet as far as pro wrestling, and people believed, what they saw on TV as to be, all the way real, the storylines, the characters, everything. So they didn't look at it as it's an act, it's characters being played or portrayed. My dad was a heel, and a lot of the time. So right here in Dallas, Texas, I remember being chased home from school because my dad, a bad guy, a heel, would feud with the Von Erichs, who were like gods around here, right? So I grew up and was exposed at a very early age, traveling up and down the highways and byways of life and the U.S. and Canada. And I experienced the territory days. So we traveled many times. In fact, I went to three different high schools my first year. So that just to kind of give you an idea of how much we moved around. And Portland, Oregon, Pacific Northwest, Don Owens territory. There were different territory. Dallas was the Von Erichs. You had the Gagnes up in Minnesota. Of course, the McMahons were the northeast part of the states. You had Crockett Promotions. You had Don Owens, like I said, in the Pacific Northwest. You had Roy Shires, I believe, was in San Francisco. So I traveled everywhere because of that, because being exposed to the business at such an early age, traveling with my father.
Tell me your favorite territory to just live in.
Probably Portland, just because
really?
I just have, I've got bitter sweets with Portland because I lost both my parents there, and there were some hardships that I experienced there. But I have a lot of great memories there. Also, Toronto, Canada, the Toronto area. I've got buddies of mine to this very day that are like my family. So I'd say, Pacific Northwest and Toronto for sure.
Obviously, I've got to ask this. Stan the Man Stasiak, former WWWF champion. And, he was a big draw, as far as I can tell, in many different places. Yet his name never seems to come up when you talk about, the old guys in the territories and stuff like that. And it seems a bit of a shame to me because, he obviously did draw money and he had a lot of success in the business and as a former champion. With the WWWF champion, he must have told you the story about when he was going to find out he was defeating Pedro Morales.
What's funny about that, James? I never knew the real story until after my dad had passed, and I had heard the tape that Bill Apter had recorded my dad, I believe, the night that he won it, or explained that. That was something different. I'm confusing that with something else. There was a dialogue showing my dad's dialogue and the agent going over what was going to happen that night, because my dad had wrestled Pedro many times, and the end result was that Pedro would hold on to the title, and it showed a dialogue there, and I'd never seen that before. I thought that was so interesting that my dad had no idea, going to the arena that night, had no idea that they were going to put the strap on him, and he become the fifth wrestler in the history of the WWE become champion. So I never learned I've learned a lot about my dad after he had passed, and I went to WWE and would, converse with Pat Patterson, Jack Lanza. These guys were agents for WWE, and they would share all kinds of stories about my father. My dad was, everyone loved him. He was a man's man. The boys would argue over him of who he was going to travel with to go to the next town, because they knew that if Stan Stasiak was in the car, the trip would go so much smoother because you'd have him laughing the whole way. My dad was a jokester, great storyteller. You would have loved my dad. He was just, everyone loved him.
Great sideburns as well.
And Neil Diamond, I think, can give him a run. But I will say my dad did have a mean streak, and he was a tough cookie, and he wasn't like a body guy. He liked to drink his beer, and he liked to brawl, and he would get his shirt off his back to anyone he loved, but he also didn't want to cross him the wrong way either.
He was, and I'm sure unbeknownst to most people watching this, in the Hall of Fame, but as a legacy candidate. I'm sure, obviously I'm talking to the best biased person in the world, of course, but I mean, he for all his accomplishments, I don't really think he should have been lumped in with so many others in just like a small video package. Were you consulted for him to go into the Hall of Fame?
It's a very, very bitter topic for me.
Oh, right.
And I try one who, you know, I'm not one to try to be, I'm actually a speaker, and I don't just want to blow smoke up, wherever just to say whatever to make people, I like to be real and have pertinence and substance to my insights and when I'm connecting with people on a speaking standpoint. But this is one of those things that it was just very, very wrong the way that it was, they did this. And look, first of all, I'm grateful, and it's an honor to acknowledge him for what he had accomplished or what he was a part of in that era. This is during a time that, the belt didn't change a whole lot. If you held the WWWF championship, which is today the same company, the WWE championship, it really meant something because it was very far and few between that belt would change hands. So there was quite a few good heels that they could have chosen from to make the transition from Pedro to get the belt onto Bruno. My dad and they're both baby faces. They didn't want them to match up. So they needed a good heel to make my dad was considered a transitional champion. He only held the belt for 9 days. But as the story goes, he says, Shawn, those were the happiest 9 days of my life, apart from, me being born. He would always say that. And back in that day, it meant a lot to him because they could have gone with a lot of other heels, but they chose my dad because he had such great heat. And as you know, a heel's boos in the arena is like the baby faces roaring cheers, right? And so anyway, fast forward years later, I had my experience with pro wrestling, and I got out of the business back in, when was it, 2002, pursued my chiropractic career. I've been serving my community here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for the past, 15 plus years, and developed a speaking career along the way, which I'm going to the next level with. And I dabble with, and not to go down a rabbit hole, but I'm going to circle back to answer your question. I'm just giving you a picture of how this all kind of came about and how this affected me. I do also dabble in some of the entertainment projects I have going on with my alter ego character Phobia, and you can check that out at the outdated website, which is going to be updated very soon. That's FOBIA-TV.com. But
Season Pro. Season Pro.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, so I've got some big visions with that, and we can get into that maybe a little bit more down the road. But long story short, this is already a long story, is I had anticipated, being out of the business as long as I have. I felt that, what I've done since I've been out of the business has been nothing but positive, and giving back to my community and developing a speaking career and trying to, I help people with my hands and help change lives in a better way. Both physically, mentally, spiritually, with the type of work and space that I'm involved with and have been for the past, since I've been out of wrestling. And I campaigned and promoted my father every year, a couple months prior to WrestleMania, because of the big Hall of Fame ceremony before the big show. And I also promoted the pitch, the idea that, there's never been a father-son duo to ever hold the WB title ever in history. And still to this very day, it hasn't been done. So I thought that, I feel like I'm staying in the best shape I can as I get older, and trying to keep, the chiropractic lifestyle, healthier lifestyle that I lead. And, I feel like my shelf life has been extended a little bit, and keeping some integrity there. And I thought, you just never know. I'm certainly not waiting by my phone, to ring but I'm always open for the right business. And, I just thought, though, I'm open to the right business, but again, it had to be the right business. It makes sense creatively and on a business standpoint to ever even consider going back to that in any way. But I still promoted my father getting inducted in the Hall of Fame. I felt that he was worthy of that. Even though he held the belt for only 9 days, he still was an original pioneer of that industry, in that company, the earlier stages. And I always felt that when the time would come, when it was time, I had faith that eventually he would be, granted that that acknowledgement. They would call upon me, his only son, that I know of anyway, his only son to take the honor and, share a couple stories. Thank you, good night. Never happened. I noticed that a few years, the past 5-6 years before they did what they did, they would show this legacy wing, or maybe it was a couple years. It was a couple years anyway, where they showed this legacy wing. And I was like, I get nervous. I go, oh man, don't tell me they wouldn't just throw my dad in that, would they? I feel like he would deserve an actual official, a real induction, and for a couple years that, would happen. And I was like, okay, good. We got another year. Maybe next year they'll induct him finally. You know what I mean? And I was kind of anticipating and expecting that call, but the call never came. And the way that I learned about my dad being inducted in the Hall of Fame, I had just finished a workout at LA Fitness. I was in the parking lot in my car. I looked down at my phone because it's blowing up on social media. And I have all these fans congratulating me. Congratulations, your dad's finally in. He deserves it. All this, all these comments and congratulations. And you'd think I'd be happy. You think you're right. I was the complete opposite. I knew right then and there what had happened, because the WrestleMania was like a couple days from that point, and the Hall of Fame was like a couple days or a day before. So I knew no one had called me, no one had informed me. I knew that they were going to just throw him in this wing. And I was like, oh man, and no disrespect to the other wrestlers that are in that wing, but I immediately called Vince McMahon, and he didn't pick up, of course. I didn't expect him to. He was busy with obviously WrestleMania and all the things that were going on. I texted him. I said, just please don't do it right, man. Can you just grant it next year when they're in the New York area? The following year they were like I think it was MetLife Stadium or one of those big stadiums, because he was a big hit wherever he went. But I felt that would be more appropriate geographically to have him inducted there. And he texted me back and said, don't take it personal. It's just a company decision. I was so hurt by that, because not only was I not informed, I wasn't invited to even come out to the arena just to show my respects for all the other legends. It was just a really raw deal, man. And it really put a bitter taste in my mouth. And I don't hold on to it. I've released it and let it go, but it is compartmentalized and is definitely something that if, I can pull from, if I ever had to bring some real content to the table, so to speak. You talk about being full of piss and vinegar. That's something that would light me up very easily. So it is what it is, man, but it just goes to show, to me, it was so disrespectful. And I was I was depressed for a couple of weeks. Like, it really caused me some despair and grief, because I anticipated this for a long time and I thought they would do the right thing. And I don't need Mr. T time where I'm up there for an hour, just give me 5 minutes. Let me tell 2 funny stories. I'm taking this acknowledgement and award, for my dad. God bless, good night. But it never came. So I must be so disregarded or not liked or on some shit list, I guess, that, I wasn't even, worthy in their minds to be able to join that evening and show my respects for that ceremony, much less, not even inform me of anything at all. So it was a raw deal.